What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This week we are bringing back an old friend into the shop, our 1970 C10 Project De Niro. We've been putting off the final project on this thing for quite some time, and it's finally time to bring it back into the shop. We are ready to do our bed floor, which is going to be a couple different parts. We have to incorporate our rear fenders, a door, an access door for our fuel cell, for our AccuAir system, and then we have the wood and the trim and all that good stuff. So we do have a ton of work to do, and the first step was getting some dimensions and some layout. So this center section right here, it's going to be a 38-inch door, which is basically going to be the entire length of our bed here. However, we are going to have about a 6-inch section in the back, so we have somewhere to hinge our wood off of. So we're going to be using aluminum tubing. This is 3/4 inch square. And we're going to be just basically building another structure, like a skeleton. That way we have something to secure our wood in the center section for our door. So let's get to cutting some aluminum, and we'll get some stuff tacked together and start getting it in. All right, we got our frame set back into the truck. It is clamped down on a few spots just to hold it down so I could figure out how I'm going to be fastening it, where it's fastening to. Also, I have two more sections I'm going to have to weld on, which is this section over here on front of the tire as well as on that side. But I don't think I'm going to be able to weld it solid and still get it in place up and down. So it's going to have to come back out to get painted. So I'm going to be making this section here and that section over there bolt on. So just by adding an angle onto the sides, which will have a through bolt through this section of the frame here and one over there on that side, that should hold it all together. This is basically at this point just kind of like a big spacer, and again somewhere for my door to hinge off of, which is going to be here. So I think that should be good once I get these done. All right, we got our two last sections of our aluminum framework done, bolted on. As you see, we got two tabs welded on to our 3/4 square stock here, bolted in. So at this point, we're just gonna get this thing set exactly where we want it. I got a bunch of clamps holding it back here. We're gonna square it up, make sure everything's plumb square, and then we'll go ahead and start drilling out for our 1/4-20 countersunk bolts that are gonna attach our aluminum frame to our metal frame. And then we are done with this part of the project, and we are ready to move on, possibly laying out some wood, or we're going to start fabbing up our door. All right, guys, we're gonna take a little break from working on that C10 to talk about this week's sponsor, Avalon King, specifically their Armor Shield 9. This Armor Shield 9 is probably the easiest way to make your paint pop and to keep it looking glossy. This tiny bottle packs a whole lot of power, protecting your car's paint for over 2 years. And it even gives it a super hydrophobic coating. All you're gonna do is set up your sponge with your applicator cloth. You drop on some Armor Shield 9, wipe a thick layer vertically and horizontally, and buff off any residue. It's just that simple. You can apply your Armor Shield 9 to your paint, to your wheels, to your trim, even onto your glass. All right, so if you want to pick yourself up an Armor Shield 9, hit the link in our description below to take advantage of all their Black Friday specials. Keep your car protected and keep it looking glossy. Now let's get back to work on that C10. All right, we got the framing of our door all put together and welded. Got our two cross members where we're gonna be bolting our wood trim down through the whole assembly. Next step is we're gonna be making a hinge. Yeah, we're making a hinge. I've used piano hinges in the past. They do work, but they're a little hard to put on and off. So I'm gonna be making an aluminum hinge, since this is an aluminum frame. We got a small piece of tubing with a 3/8 hole going through it. That's basically more like a space than anything. Then we're gonna cut some more tabs like this on the plasma cutter. So we'll get two of these welded to our spacer where our bolts will slide through. And then there's gonna be two more tabs very similar to this welded onto the frame of our bed floor. And that's just gonna act as a pivot point. So we're gonna go get some of these cut. I tried a couple other ones. These are a tiny bit smaller, but as you see, once you drill that 3/8 hole, you don't have much meat left on the actual tab. So I revised it a little bit, made it a tiny bit bigger. Let's not lose that one. And this is what I'm gonna come up with. So there's 4 on each, so that's 8. I got 1, let's do 7 more. The hinge side is already welded onto my door side. The only thing that I changed was I actually added an angle behind my tabs just to give me a little extra space to weld our tabs to our frame. So now it's welded all the way around on the tab, inside and outside of our little bracket here. So I'm gonna do the same thing with the frame side on each side. So we're gonna slip these in, we'll get this thing squared up all the way around, weld those on, and that will pretty much complete our frame section of our bed. All right, now that we got all our framing done, our door complete, everything's operating, it's time to start doing the layout of our wood. So a couple little things here, our fill neck on our fuel cell, which is inside of there, you see it right there, is still sticking up just a tiny bit higher than our framing. So I'm gonna have to do some kind of relief cut underneath the wood, maybe drill it out with a big circular saw and do something like that, just to give that a little clearance. It needs to come down heavy 1/8 inch. So that's the first thing. When I did my layout to build my door, I was trying to take into consideration where we're gonna have a seam. You know, the door's obviously gotta open. So what I did was laid it out. So I'm gonna be cutting our bedwood right along this seam right here. So this piece that stays stationary will have the metal trim, this trim here, but the metal trim is gonna stay. So that's gonna be fixed in, and that seam right there along that line will be our cut mark. So hopefully that works out, and we're just gonna run our Fest tool track saw down this. We'll rip this down, and then, you know, I obviously gotta figure out where my cut line is gonna be here and on that side down there. So I'll probably work on getting the door section cut and fit correctly, and then we'll move on to the right and left side where our fenders are going. All right, time to start cutting up this bedwood. This stuff comes pre-finished, so you gotta be super careful so you don't scratch it up. So I got some cardboard laying down on my plywood to keep it all from scratching. Also taped up where we're gonna be making our cut. So this is our driver's side of the door. So this is where we're gonna be cutting it. This part's gonna be the door, this part's gonna be staying on the trim. So I got my level about 1 1/8 inches from my cut line. That's gonna be the back side of my guard. Got a new blade on it, so we're ready to start cutting some wood. Let's get it. All right, we got our first cut done. It worked out pretty well. So as you see here, this is where our door is gonna swing open. We have a cut there. This may have to be cut back a little bit more depending on how our hinge works out. And then we have our cut, our rip all the way down this side, which worked out perfect. It's nice when a plan comes together. So this piece right here will stay stationary and our trim will stay stationary. And this seam right here, which we're gonna have to stain and clean it up a little bit, that's gonna be where our door opens. So that should work out pretty well. I'm gonna go ahead and get my next two pieces on this side just to make sure our cut on this side is gonna be the same as that. And it should, so let's find out, and hopefully it works out. All right, now that we got our two sides cut for our door, it all worked out perfectly. The next thing I'm gonna have to do is to figure out this piece of wood, is get my fender set. You guys remember I previously made this one with this little recess in it to swallow the wood and try to make it a little easier for us to cut it. So we'll get this thing clamped on where it needs to be, and then we'll start getting some measurements to cut around our fender. All right, so we got our passenger side rear fender tub situation marked out here. It's gonna go in a recess, so there is a little wiggle room, but I'm gonna keep my cut on the outside of this X, and then I'm gonna come back onto the inside and follow this line all the way around, get that cut out here with our jigsaw, go slide it in. All right, we got all of our cuts made on the passenger side, other than our rip that's gonna go against the bedside to that last piece. I'm kind of running a little shy on some wood, so I'm gonna have to get creative. So the last two pieces that go on the bedside have a single groove instead of two. So I'm gonna be ripping that piece down basically right at the line. So you're not gonna even really see much wood once the trim goes on. But either way, we'll get that on. But in order for me to really go any further, I'm gonna go ahead and have to modify that other fender, doing the same thing I did with here. So let's go get that done, cut our last two sections for the front and back of the wheel, and that pretty much will wrap up the wood. All right, now that we got both fenders set in place, we're gonna go back to our wood and start getting some of this stuff done. So I already got this piece in, and this next piece is gonna have our trim on it, but it's not gonna be connected to this. So we're gonna have to get a little fancy with that. So let's see what we got to do. All right, so here's our next piece. And as you kind of can see here, so this would be the gap between our two boards. This board is gonna be stationary where the door is. So our trim is gonna sit on there like so, and it's just gonna have a finished piece of wood here on the edge. So in order to keep that wood as a one-piece assembly, I went ahead and cut a couple shims that we're gonna be gluing on down the side of the board, and then we'll be able to glue this piece on, and then our piece of trim will bolt through the trim, and everything will stay where it needs to be. All right, man, we're looking real good here. Next step is I gotta start fastening some of these wood strips down. That way I know exactly where I'm gonna fall on this cut piece over here. It should work out as far as my layout goes, but I also wanna go ahead and get the door to kind of make sure that we have clearance with that. So we're gonna start getting some of these strips down, which is actually bolts the wood down. I opted out for the pre-drilled strips. From bedwood, you could get your 1/4-inch hole cut in the strip, but you know, that just depends on your layout of your framing and all that. So I'm gonna be doing that myself. I got a layout already on this strip, and I'm gonna be taking it over to our hydraulic press, and I bought a little bit to do a square punch. So we kind of rigged this up a little bit to make it work, but it does work. So let me get this thing punched out, we'll get it over there, we'll use some stainless carriage bolts and get it set. We got most of all of our wood pulled out, well really all of it. That piece is just laying there. Wood progress is going real good, real happy with how it's coming out. Next step in order to kind of finish the fabrication section of this is gonna finish modifying our fenders. We need to fill in this gap inside of our bedside upper rail here. So I'm gonna go ahead, I already pulled out our passenger side. It's on my welding table. So I already got a template cut for my passenger side before I pulled it out. So we're just gonna be cutting a couple little blanks like this. This one I already bended a 1 3/8" flange to match the factory flange on here. We're gonna be cutting off this section here, and this is gonna be getting welded on like this. I'll go ahead and bend my flange on this one. We'll take it over to the shrinker, get that radius, come on over and test it, and then this one should be ready to go. All right, we got both filler pieces pretty much ready to go. We're gonna have to do some cutting on our fender itself, get rid of this flange, and grind back a little bit of this material so we can go and get that welded on there. All right, this is it. Here we go. The wood is done. I do got to add a couple screws along the sides of our door. I don't know if you can see that up front here, but it's kind of popping up just right here. So I'm gonna add a couple screws along this right here. That should be done. But you know what they say, build it and then take it apart. So time to start removing some wood so we get these fenders off. I got to do a little body work. My plan was to paint them green, but after staring at the black, I think the black works. So kind of makes it a little easier for me. We're gonna do the low gloss black. So yeah, I'm gonna have to start removing these strips here and here. We could slide this wood out here and here, and then we could get these pieces out on both our fenders, get them painted. We got a couple raw pieces of wood we're gonna have to treat. Bedwood gives you a touch-up kit. Let me get this done, cross it off my list. Trucks for sale, who wants it? All right, the bedwood is done. Just needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but all our raw sides have been stained and shot some polyurethane on it. So all this is protected from the elements and we're ready to put this back in. Next thing we gotta do is get our fenders blocked out and ready to go. All right, our rear tubs, fenders, call them what you will, are done. Freshly coated with, you already know, my favorite, Duplicolor low gloss black. So sprayed them down, even hit it with a little bit of that matte clear. I think they came out pretty good. So let's get these things in, get this wood done. right, there you go. The wood bed floor and all the assembly that went along with it. She's looking good, man. Let me get these wheels on, get outside, and get a real look at it. All right, guys, well, De Niro is one step closer to being 100% complete. We finished off our bedwood floor in here and it came out great. We got our modified rear fender tubs from Auto Metal Direct. I made that recessed slot for our wood to slide in. I think it came out awesome. You see 0 fasteners, and that's just the way we like it. The bedwood kit on a whole was awesome, man. I really like the fact that it was already a finished product. Came out great. The aluminum bed framing worked out great. We have our hatch, which you know, you definitely have to do your layout when you're building something like this. It is a little tight, but I'm probably just gonna do a little sanding on the side over here. And then, of course, we're gonna need some electrical actuators. You don't wanna have to do this every time you go to a gas station. But for now, it's in and it's done, and it looks awesome. Yeah, so we're gonna enjoy it, and we're gonna drive it around. Speaking of driving, we couldn't be driving around with those old wheels, so we did get a nice set of custom 2-piece wheels from St. Paul's Performance. These are a very custom wheel that I've designed myself. Joe sent his design out to the manufacturer, and I think they did a great job. So if you guys are looking for custom wheels, hit up St. Paul Performance, ask for Joe, and he's got your back, man. You know, the interior came out super nice. It's clean. When you're driving in it, you feel like you're in a classic car, but you got your modern stuff like power windows and air conditioning, which are 2 thumbs up in South Florida, man. You need that AC. And then, you know, the last final thing that we could possibly do here, guys, is build out some inner fenders in the front here, maybe a closeout panel, some beauty panels here, just to kind of finish off our engine compartment and give it a nice clean look. So let us know what you guys think. We should go ahead and get on this project sooner than later, or should we sell the truck, man? If anybody wants this truck more than us, hit us up in the comment section. Let us know. Anything could be for sale. But for now, let's go drive.